BookTube, thanks for stopping by. I'm Heather and I have a briefish update on my reading for the week. I did finish the 3 books I started last week, and that's Happy Making, and I have 3 more that I'm about to start or that are on the go, and I'm hoping to get through those this week coming up. My reading in September tends to change its shape a little bit. Sometimes it gets a little slower because the academic year has started, and even for academic librarians, the year gets busier and the workload shifts and the attention changes and takes different kinds of energy. So we'll see how that goes. So the 3 I finished included Am I Disturbing You by Hebert, translated by Sheila Fishman. This was published in 1998 and is a Quebecois novel. It tells the story of Delphine and her friend Edouard. Delphine leaves Quebec as a very young woman. It's unclear for much of the novella how old she is. She is in pursuit of her married traveling salesman lover, and the story unfolds from there in a series of romantic and emotional triangles. She ends up having a friendship of sorts with Edouard, and the novella, it's under 100 pages. It kind of recounts both Delphine's life and her relationship with Edouard, mostly her life and his understanding of her life. It's all narrated from his point of view. And Delphine has packed a lot of living in a relatively short life, and Hebert packs it all into a very short novel. It's an odd little thing. And the characters are odd in their way. It's largely about, I think, feelings and about excess of feelings and a lack of feelings. It's worth the read, but it's very kind of odd. It doesn't have a plot, really. There's a plot thread through it, but it's not interested in plot. It's interested in emotions and how emotions work and the consequences of emotions, I suppose. So I'm happy to have read that because it's been a long time since I've read some Quebecois literature. So that's a good one to have crossed off my reading list. Let's see, what else did I finish? I've got my notes down here because I need notes. I did finish Helene Tursten's The Glass Devil, Swedish police procedural novel, which I found disappointing. The thing I predicted was going to happen around a red herring-ish use of a satanic panic plot or subplot did unfold, and in very fairly predictable ways, and the countering plot also unfolds in quite predictable ways. It's the kind of mystery novel that it's fairly easy to guess what the outcome is going to be, or what the driving force behind the crime that's investigated. To guess that within the first 50 pages or so of a 300, 400-page novel, which is kind of a signal that it's not a particularly strong mystery. The other thing that I found off-putting is mostly a pet peeve of mine for reading mysteries, is that in the last eighth or quarter of the novel, probably an eighth, is essentially exposition by the person who's committed the crime of what had happened all the way along the plot. So all the backstory is filled in by the character who's committed a crime. And I find that a particularly annoying type of conclusion making in a mystery novel. So I'm a little disappointed in my reading my first Tursten. Don't know whether I'll go back and read more of her. It was worth giving it a try. But all in all, I'd say The Glass Devil, bit of a disappointment for my Women in Translation month reading. And then a happier one. I did read Becky Chambers' A Psalm for the Wild Bill, which just came out this year, and it was, as I expected, a hopeful, optimistic, cheerful read. I think it's sometimes getting pitched as a little bit as a dystopian novel, and it's not a dystopian novel at all, I don't think. I mean, the events in it take place after a period of time in which robots essentially become independent thinkers and livers, and the world is divided between human beings and robot beings. But that moment of change is not depicted as a moment of technological catastrophe. So it's not very much like the scenes you would see in the Terminator movies, that kind of thing. It's very different in tone. The world is divided into two, and lives continue on both sides of the world that's depicted. And it's largely utopian in its tone and approach. The human characters and the robot characters have lives that they're able to live as they choose. They choose work that they enjoy. They can change jobs, do different kinds of work. It's a cooperative kind of world and environment. So utopian. We have sibling Dex meeting the robot whose name I've forgotten at the moment. After a series of journeys. And they learn a bit about each other and a bit about each other's world. So as a narrative exploring ideas and exploring two individuals who don't understand each other's world very much, it reminded me of a little bit of 18th century dialogues and fictions. So things like Rasselas and, to a lesser extent, Montesquieu's Persian Letters, where you have philosophical discussions of how the world is organized and how things work in the world, with the two characters, one of whom is naive and one of whom is not naive. The twist Chambers puts on it is that both of the characters, the human character and the robot character, are a little bit naive about each other's world, and it's a playing off of points of view. It's a great little novella. It's very short, easy to read, and cheerful if you want to kind of think about a different kind of world. It's a kind of world that privileges making and mending and reusing, replacing, repairing, not necessarily creating everything new out of plastic, which I find a happy making thought. Maybe our world's not going to turn out that way, but it's a happy thing to think about. So I very much appreciated having a chance to read the Chambers book as quickly as I was able to. My library was great in getting it to us quickly. What else? Reading for next week. I've got 3 things on the go and I've dipped into a couple of them. I'm going to read Vivian Gornick's novella. It's called Fierce Attachments. Came out in 1987. Gornick's memoir moves between describing her childhood in the 40s and 50s and her present life and the conversations she's having with her mother as they're walking through New York. The conversations seem to be largely pretty argumentative and confrontational, but sustained over time. And this motif of walking, I think, is something that Gornick comes back to over and over again in her career. In something I read earlier this year or late last year, The Odd Woman in the City, walking New York City is kind of a backbone of that book as well, where Gornick understands the world and herself and the people around it through the process of walking the city. So I'm looking forward to reading this. It's yet another memoir of mother-daughter relationships. I'm slowly working my way through most of Gornick's nonfiction prose. Let's see, what else do I have on my list for this week coming up? Bernadine Evaristo's The Emperor's Babe. I have picked up from the library. I'm also slowly making my way through Evaristo's work. This one, The Emperor's Babe, is a novel told in verse, and it's set in London of the Roman period, so following the colonization of England by the Roman army. This one looks like it's going to be a quick read. It looks like it's going to be mixing contemporary kinds of language and topics with historically accurate views of London. So one of the things I noticed is references to designer goods are being used in the context of ancient London, which I think is going to be an interesting play to watch unfold in the verse novel. And finally, I managed to snag from the library and an electronic copy much more quickly than I expected is Miriam Toews' Fight Night. The ebook came through in my account much more quickly than I expected, but it's happy making, and I'm going to spend, I think, the weekend reading it. It doesn't look like it'll take me very long. It's the story of 3 generations of women in a same household a grandmother, a pregnant single mother, and the youngest member, the narrator, a child of about, I'd say from the pages I dipped into 8 or 9, maybe 10-ish, hard to tell. The story of their lives. Very much looking forward to this because I always enjoy Toews writing. So that's what I finished last week, the Becky Chambers and the Hebert, both of which would fit into a Shoddy September's reading list, and the Helene Tursten, which was the most disappointing of the lot. And what I'm going to pick up this week, Gornick's memoir, Evaristo's first novel, and the one I'm most looking forward to, Toews' novel, Fight Night. I hope you have a good reading week and that you find books to engage your mind, offer you distraction or comfort if you need it, and that you find a happy way of moving through the world. Bye-bye.